Namaskar and welcome to our weekly program on news from the worlds of economy, trade and development from an Indian perspective of the world. On the program, India's GST reform creates an appetite for discounts. Companies scramble to give maximum benefit to the consumer. The French are not in the mood for austerity. The planned spending cuts lead to Prime Minister Bayou's ouster. Indonesia bets big on dairy. $3 billion cow import plan aims to nourish millions, but it faces investor concerns. Before we move on, let's set the stage for our top story by listening to India's Information and Broadcasting, Railways and Electronics and Information Technology Minister. He's assuring us that the benefits of GST reforms will be passed on to the consumer.
हर सेक्टर की जितनी भी फेडरेशंस हैं, जितनी भी काउंसिल्स हैं, सब ने बहुत क्लियर कहा है कि ये जो बेनिफिट है जीएसटी का जो बेनिफिट है वो सीधा का सीधा ट्रांसमिट करेंगे मध्यम वर्गीय परिवारों को, यूज़र्स को, सभी देश के नागरिकों को ये बेनिफिट ट्रांसफ़र होगा। इंश्योरेंस का बेनिफिट भी ट्रांसफ़र में होगा। मोदी जी ने बहुत स्पष्ट तौर पे निर्णय लिए हैं और उन निर्णयों का एग्जीक्यूशन भी किया है। वित्त मंत्री जी ने बहुत स्पष्ट तौर पे कहा है कि शी विल कीप अ हॉक्स आई, very clear focus on making sure that the benefits of GST rate rationalization are reaching the common man, every citizen, every family.
So the government has urged industry to pass on the benefits of GST to the consumer, and industry seems to be responding. Let's look at the impact of GST 2.0. There's been a wave of price reductions and major brands have been passing on the benefits. Let's start with the automobile sector. You know, the automobile sector is a sector that is got plenty of appetite for, for consumption. And we can see that there's been slashing of prices across major brands. Hyundai has, across all their brands, Venue, Creta, Alcazar, and all these other brands, even the smaller cars, i10s, i20s, Vernas and all that, they have reduced their rates from between 72,000 and 240,000 rupees. Then Tata Motors has reduced it between 75,000 and 150,000 rupees. The Tata brands are Nexon, Harrier, Punch in the SUV categories. Then there is Mahindra. Mahindra is between 133,000 and 156,000 rupees. Of course, if we look at the brands, there are Thar, Scorpio, Bolero, XUV and the like. There are more automobile brands, of course. MG Motors, they have reduced it between 54,000 and 304,000 rupees. Now, they have, of course, a number of brands, Aster, Gloucester, Hector, and then they have the EV segments as well. There is Windsor, ZS and company. Then there's Renault, and Renault has reduced it between 55,000 and 95 and about 96,395. Those are the rates that are available around for which reductions are available, and they have it in Quid and Kiger and these other kind of brands. So you can expect similar cuts from other brands as well in the automobile segment. So this is one area that is going to see in this festive season a lot of discounts. Let's move on to our next slides, because still with the automobiles, we can see that luxury auto brands are also seeing major cuts. The Mercedes and the BMWs of this world, they are also cutting quite significantly, in fact. And then motorcycles, we see amongst the motorcycles, there is Bajaj, TVS, Yamaha, Royal Enfield, Honda. All of them have cut theirs to some extent, of course, but the larger bikes, which are actually in the 350cc and above, their prices are going to go up because they are in the category of the 40% of GST. So GST has been cut on a number of other goods, as we know. So we can expect in the FMCG segment. So the FMCG segment, we know all the things that we like in shops, from chocolates to teas to all household items, the processed foods, staple foods, rice, dals, etc. all are going to come down between 10% and more than that, because the the GST has been reduced to 5%, and in some cases they have been exempt altogether. So we're going to see quite a significant cut over there. Then there is, of course, life-saving drugs reduced to 5% or nil, and these are extremely important because this is a sector where the price of goods were very, very high. And now we are seeing significant reductions. Let's say in cancer drugs, for instance, it's coming down by about 8,000 rupees or so. And then there are drugs also for hemophilia and the like, which have come down by over 5,000 rupees. So then there is also in the agriculture segment, where that farm equipment is going to be coming down by around 5%. And cement, which is, for our housing sector, has come down from about 10%. So we can hope that that is going to be reflected in the cost of construction and ultimately in the cost of housing. So GST has also been reduced quite significantly by about 10% in the electronics and appliances segment. So you can expect your ACs, televisions and all that to come down by around 10%. And apart from that, finally, we look at education, stationery, all these other segments which are concerned with education. The GST has been reduced to nil. So you're going to find a significant reduction in, aspects which are dealing with products which are dealing with the education sector. So all this, as we can see clearly, shows that the government is envisaging a lot of growth in these segments. So we can see that this demand is going to create jobs. It's also going to create growth for the economy. Now let's move on to our next story. We are going to be listening to a soundbite. Before I introduce you to our expert on the program, let's listen to the chief representative of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. His name is Takuchi Takuro, and he was speaking at the Mumbai Indo-Japanese program just recently. He talked about Japanese complementarities with India. He said that India's digital strength and Japan's manufacturing expertise, they are complementary and they can together unlock huge opportunity. Let's listen.
India can provide values to Japan of labor forces and so market, for example. And if we look at digital, so in Japan, there is a strong manufacturing base and also shortage of the digital talent. On the other hand, India, you have the world's largest, so most advanced and dedicated digital talent. That's why we can provide India so digital transformation business opportunities. On the other hand, India can provide digital so services and also digital talent, for example.
Well, Professor Nilanjan Baunik is with us. He's an economist. He joins us from Hyderabad. He's breaking down the key stories for us. Thank you, Professor Baunik. How much competitive pricing has GST 2.0 brought into the market? How long is it going to last also, given the festive season is quite close?
I think, Mark, this is an excellent move by the government. And let me explain how it is impacting life of any person, be it a businessman, be it a consumer like you and me. Now, you have very nicely showcased in what type of items the price is going to come down, be it aspirational goods like car, motorbikes, air conditioner, refrigerator, or be it goods which are meant for day-to-day consumption, for instance, butter, ghee. It is also impacting the health because the health insurance, the cost of buying individual health insurance has come down, cost of medicine has come down. Now, the way I see it is because the prices are come down and most of these prices are price elastic in nature, meaning that
Yes.
if the prices are coming down, the consumer tend to consume more and more of that items, which means the revenue for the business are going to go up. And when the revenue goes up, it also means that there will be more tax compliance in the sense that earlier, if you would have walked into some business store, they could ask you that, do you want a bill or you just want it to buy in cash? But the very fact that the price of items are coming down, the compliance is also going to go up. And there is something called Laffer curve in economics, which suggests that as the tax rate comes down, what you see is more compliance on part of both the consumer as well as the business owners,
Right.
which also means more number of business activities which were earlier happening outside the tax realm is now going to come under the tax, or the formalization is going to happen. And if the business are going to get formalized, which also means it is going to impact our GDP. So
Indeed.
in total, what we are seeing that consumers are going to pay or consume more, which means more revenue for the business owners. And also for the business owners, the other important thing which is going to happen, because the GST rates are coming down,
Yes.
the input cost of for making some final goods, that is also coming down. So in a way,
Okay.
you're
Fair
also
enough.
making the business owners more competitive in terms of producing goods and
Let
services.
me take you up on that input cost factor that you brought in. Do you see the Indian manufacturing gaining in the medium term at least because can they absorb, the US tariff shocks? Because the US tariff shocks are also impacting the supply chain.
Yeah, Mark, I won't give that much weightage to the US tariff shock. And let me explain again. If you look into the GDP, almost 60% of our GDP is driven by domestic consumption. Now, when you're giving incentive like this, what we have seen in the case of GST coming down, what you are basically doing is you are shifting. And in US, we are just exporting out of our total export. 18% is going to the US out of the total India's export to the rest of the world. Now, out of that 18%, most of the items of interest to India, for instance, pharmaceutical, for instance, electronic items like iPhones, for instance, medicaments or refined petroleum
Right.
products, these are kept outside the ambit of tariff. So anyway, it's not going to impact us much. Only the sector which is of concern is textile and gems and jewelry. And we are trying to see that whether we can shift our production base to a third country so that we can start exporting from third country like UAE or Ethiopia or Oman, where the reciprocal tariff is lower. So to cut the long story short, all we are trying to argue is the impact of US Trump tariff is not going to be that much.
Okay.
On the
Fair enough.
other hand, by reducing the GST rate, what we are going to see is a animal spirit kind of thing is going to break, which is
Okay.
basically suggesting more. And mind you, because we are giving boost to the consumption, the multiplier effect is also going to play out, which means that the
Indeed.
people are going to consume more, they are going to pay more tax compliance, which also means a positive impact on our GDP growth, something which we have seen. If you look into the first quarter GDP numbers,
Right. Indeed.
it has come out to be a 5-quarter high. So, and this is not surprising. So, I won't take that Trump tariff that seriously. And if you go by what he has been posting on his tweet, I think he's also going to mellow down. And this excess tariff of additional 25% is
Yes.
going to come out very soon.
So you say that the GST reforms are going to spur domestic demand, and we know that Fitch has also increased its ratings for India for FY26. They've gone up from 6.5 to 6.9% for GDP growth based on the strong Q2 expectations from domestic demand. Now, how competitive will our manufacturing become for the international market? Because you would say that we're talking domestic largely, but international too matters. And I was asking earlier really about the Trump tariff affecting the world supply chains, because it's not only on India that he's put these tariffs, but on products that would affect the input cost.
Right, but as I said, that even for doing business, for the the finance minister has carefully tried to. We have a problem of inverted duty structure. So what
Yes.
has been happening with the context of GST rationalization, as well as if you look into the budgetary documents, government of India is trying consciously to remedify this inverted duty structure so that the cost of manufacturing in India comes down,
Okay,
and
great.
we are still one of the places where you have land and labor cost, one of the cheapest in the world. So in that way, we can also try to sign some other free trade agreement. For instance, we are now talking with Singapore whether we can actually send our shrimp product to Singapore, because shrimp is one of the item which got kind of impacted by the US tariff. Likewise, we are talking with UAE so that we can send some of our gems and jewelry items. For textile, we are talking with some of the government like Ethiopia and Oman, and some
Right.
of the bigger textile firms. I know for sure they are
Yes.
actually shipping their product from this third country to get out from the impact of the Trump's tariff.
Stay with us, Professor Banik, for our next story as well. We're talking about France now, and Macron's 2024 snap election. It backfired, leaving France with a fractured parliament and soaring debt. Public finances had worsened. The debt to GDP ratio is at about 114% of GDP, and the deficit is nearly twice the EU limit. The ousted Prime Minister, Bayou, he proposed a 44 billion euro austerity drive, and the proposed measures faced backlash, and his vote of confidence was political suicide. Let's look at this report. France's voters have strongly rejected President Emmanuel Macron's latest austerity push, which was spearheaded by his now ousted Prime Minister François Bayrou. The backlash was so intense that Bayou's government collapsed in a no-confidence vote on September 8, 2025, plunging France into fresh political turmoil. The austerity plan proposed 44 billion euros in spending cuts aimed at reducing France's budget deficit from 5.8% of GDP to below the EU's 3% threshold by 2029. It also called for freezing welfare payments and social benefits, which hit vulnerable populations hardest. Symbolically, it called for the scrapping of 2 public holidays, an unpopular move seen as an attack on workers' rights. It also called for capping government spending, including reductions in public services and infrastructure investment.
Well,
we are here to celebrate the departure of Bayrou and his budget of austerity that attacked workers in an unbelievable way. It's the first step before the mobilization of September 10, when we'll try to block the country. It's a people-led mobilization, a very significant one. We are taking our fate into our own hands.
Bayou argued that France's public debt, over 3.3 trillion euros, or 114% of GDP, was unsustainable and posed a threat to national sovereignty and future generations. He warned that without action, France would be dominated by creditors and lose its freedom. Leftists condemned the cuts as socially unjust, while the far right claimed they hurt ordinary citizens. Movements like Bloquons Tout or Let's Block Everything gained traction, with unions threatening strikes and demonstrations. The National Assembly voted 364 to 194 against Bayrou, forcing his resignation and leaving Macron scrambling to appoint a new prime minister.
Yes, we will not govern in a grand coalition. We will not participate in the shenanigans that are currently being carried out to be able to continue a policy that no one wants in the country. We will not participate in any government that does not carry a program of rupture. And, as I reiterated today, the unbowed will not sell themselves out for a place in ministries.
The question is whether the philosopher Macron will take vicarious liability for his government's actions. His centrist bloc has no parliamentary majority and faces rising public anger. The austerity plan may have been fiscally ambitious, but socially and politically, it proved toxic. The Economic Brief, DD India. Let's turn to Professor Banik once again. The former British Prime Minister, Professor Banik, Prime Minister Sunak, he had taken these tough decisions for the United Kingdom, brought that economy back on track, but he lost power, as we know. So do you think France has reached a stage where it needs that kind of tough decision making?
I think Europe as a whole, including France, is gaping at a lost decade. Now, if you see what is happening in Europe, it is actually being run by a set of groups which are very strong. For instance, the trade unions, So what is happening is the trade unions, they always want to have a very high wage rate, which is otherwise not sustainable in the long run. And they are always up in arms against the government whenever they want to pursue any austerity measure. Also, what is happening is, if I'm looking into the median age of working age population, in case of France, it is close to 43 as opposed to in India, which is around 28. Another thing I should also mention is in France, almost 80% of the economic activities is formal in nature, whereas in case of India, 90% of our workforce is going in the and working in the informal sector. What it implies is there is very little room for wage negotiation. And when you have this strong group of trade unions trying to put on the wage rate, which is quite high, in terms of the productivity, France, Germany, UK, all of them are losing on the productivity because the insider, which is run by the trade unions group, which are also politically quite active, they don't want the benefit they were enjoying so far to come down. And because of that, the government is losing out money because the tax rate is too high. And
Yes.
because the tax rate is too high, you also don't see many private investment also taking place. So if I want to put all this thing together, what we are seeing a set of people who are trying to ensure that they get all the government benefit, be it in terms of high wage rate, be it in terms of social security payment, be it in
Okay.
terms of health benefit, and at the same time, they are not contributing, producing any goods and service productively for the
Yes.
economic cause. And so therefore, this kind of thing that we are going to see in UK, France is going to happen because the government is spending money without getting necessary amount of revenue. And this cannot sustain because in terms of working age population, we are seeing more number of people who are retired, who are pension earners,
Right.
as opposed to the people who actually are entering the workforce who are otherwise more productive. So this
Indeed.
is a very interesting situation, and I think the European model is not going to sustain.
Professor Banik, also, some reports suggest that Macron's popularity is at an all-time low, and his term ends in 2027. So, do you see a political instability hitting the economy even further?
Yeah, it's already started to happen. You know, the prime minister has been asked to resign, and this is not particular, as I said, about Macron, but anywhere else in Europe, because the productivity has come down. Government is spending too much money than what they're receiving at part of the
Yes.
revenue, and this is happening because historically, if you see, the whole of Europe was very much against immigration of skilled labors, you know, something which happened in the US. In the US, the economy continued to grow
Right.
because they embrace the incoming of skilled labor, something which is not happening in Europe. So
Right.
the Europe is kind of going back into their old system of trying to help out the trade union leaders and political whose otherwise the productivity is coming down.
Okay.
So that is creating a problem, and I think Mr. Macron is in for a tough time.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Professor Nilanjan Banik. Thank you for joining us and putting all this into perspective for us. Now,
Thank
our
you.
next story is about Indonesia. It's a bold experiment there unfolding in the country's dairy industry. Hundreds of cows have arrived from Australia as part of a $3 billion plan to expand milk production and provide free meals for millions of children and expectant mothers. But with private investors inexperienced and targets still far off, the country faces a high-stakes challenge. We leave you with Diptanshu Kashyap's report. Thank you for watching the Economic Brief. Namaskar.
Indonesia is embarking on a daring mission to transform its dairy industry. The goal to dramatically boost local milk production by importing live cattle on an unprecedented scale. Hundreds of pregnant Holstein Friesian cows from Australia have already touched down in West Java, marking the launch of this $3 billion initiative. With public funds limited, the government is turning to private companies to fund and manage the imports, blending a nationwide nutrition effort with a bold experiment in business-government partnership. The plan aims to quadruple Indonesia's dairy herd from just 220,000 to over 1 million cows in 5 years. Imported cattle will be placed under the care of cooperatives like Laras 80, while businesses share revenues with these local partners. Each cow carries a price tag of roughly $2,800, covering transport, feed, and 6 months of veterinary care, with investors expected to recoup their costs in about 3.5 years. Companies are being asked to commit to at least 20 cows annually from 2025 through 2029, steadily building the nation's dairy capacity one herd at a time. But it's not all smooth sailing. According to Dev Discourse, the program faces serious hurdles. Many participating businesses have no prior dairy experience and imports are lagging behind schedule. Experts warn that cooperatives like Laras 80 may struggle to manage such a massive influx, and infrastructure gaps could put the program's long-term success at risk. Questions linger. Can Indonesia truly meet its 1 million cow target and deliver on its promise of nutrition for millions? Indonesia's dairy push is as ambitious as it's challenging, a high-stakes effort to feed millions and achieve self-sufficiency. With inexperienced investors and logistical hurdles ahead, the journey will be as crucial as the destination. How the country navigates these obstacles will decide whether this million cow dream becomes reality. Diptanshu Kashyap's report for the Economic Brief, DD India.